Ahead is a story I kept hidden even from myself. My name is Lyra. I am 20 years old. I always thought I was just an ordinary girl, studies, books, rare walks with a friend, and warm evenings at the window with a cup of tea. I believed my life flowed quietly and peacefully, and that it would always be this way. But everything changed the day my mother told me she was getting married again. I tried not to show my emotions, but inside everything seemed to turn upside down. A new person in our home. A stranger living beside us. I didn't know how to feel about it. His name was Andre. He was 35. He looked calm, serious, but his smile was always warm, a little cautious. In the first months I kept my distance, spoke briefly, tried not to meet his eyes. But the longer he lived with us, the more often I caught strange moments. His gaze lingering on me. His voice sometimes softer than usual. And each time I told myself it was only my imagination. But my heart refused to believe it. It froze when he walked past me. It beat louder when he accidentally touched my hand. I didn't know what was happening to me. I was afraid to admit it even to myself. That evening my mom was late at work, and Andre and I stayed at home together. I tried to keep myself busy, arranging books on the shelf, pretending I was deeply absorbed in it. But inside everything trembled, as if I was waiting for something. He walked into the kitchen quietly without knocking, placed a cup of tea in front of me and said, "I noticed you like it with lemon. Try it." His voice sounded calm, but to me there was something else in it. I took the cup and my fingers trembled slightly. Andre sat across from me, and the silence between us became too obvious. I pretended to sip tea, pretended that nothing unusual was happening. But my heart was beating so loudly I was afraid he might hear it. He asked about my day, about the books I was reading. It seemed like he was searching for reasons to talk to me longer. His gaze was soft, attentive, and that made it only harder to breathe. In that moment I felt for the first time. This wasn't just stepfather and stepdaughter. It was something else, something I was afraid to even think about. I remembered how my mom used to say he was a serious, reliable man, that with him life would be calm. But near him there was no calm. Everything inside me pulled somewhere between fear and a strange desire to be closer. I tried to push those thoughts away, repeated to myself, "This is wrong. It only seems so." But the longer I looked at him, the harder it was to convince myself otherwise. And I realized that this evening was only the beginning. After that evening I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay listening to the sound of him typing on his laptop in the other room. And every sound echoed inside me. It felt like I began noticing him even where he wasn't. In the morning when I came down to the kitchen, he was already sitting at the table, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. He looked up and said a simple good morning. But in that morning, I heard more than there should have been. I tried to answer as if everything was normal, but inside it felt like every word between us had become too meaningful. At college I caught myself thinking not about lectures but about what he would say in the evening. Sometimes I got angry at myself, tried to push these thoughts away, but they came back again and again. One day I stayed late in the library and returned home late. Rain had soaked my jacket, and I was shivering when I opened the door. Andre stood in the hallway as if he had been waiting. He took my things and said, "You're all wet, you'll catch a cold." His voice sounded caring, almost too close. I felt the warmth of his hands even though he was only holding my umbrella. In that moment I realized an invisible line had formed between us. It couldn't be crossed, but every day it seemed like we were both stepping closer to it. I tried to find an explanation. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe he only saw me as a child. But my heart knew otherwise. My heart waited for every word he said. I found myself more and more often waiting for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. My mom was busy with work, came home late, and evenings with Andre became more and more common. Sometimes he read in the living room while I sat nearby with a book, pretending to be absorbed. But in reality I listened to the sound of him turning pages, the way he breathed. Ordinary things became too important. I didn't understand why. I hadn't asked for this. But each day it felt like a thin string stretched tighter between us. It didn't break, but I could feel its tension. One evening, when it was raining outside, the lights flickered, and the house grew darker than usual. He suggested lighting candles. We sat across from each other, and in that soft glow his face seemed different. I laughed at some small thing, and suddenly noticed that he was watching me too closely. I fell silent, and silence filled the room. Inside, everything froze. I wanted to stand up and leave, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. I didn't know what would happen next, and that uncertainty both frightened and drew me in. When Mom finally returned from her business trip, I felt strange. It seemed that during the time Andre and I were alone, some secret atmosphere had formed in the house, one that only we knew about. Mom smiled, asked about our days, set dinner on the table, and everything looked normal. But I caught myself unable to look her in the eyes calmly. Andre was there, helping set the table, talking to her in his usual tone. And from the outside no one would notice anything unusual. But I saw something else. The way his gaze lingered on me for a split second. The way he handed me a plate a little slower than necessary. I was afraid Mom would sense something. And when she suddenly said, "Lyra, I'm so glad you and Andre get along so well, it makes me feel calmer about you," my heart seemed to stop. I nodded, said everything was fine, but inside it felt heavy. That night I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, listening to Mom's quiet conversation with him in the other room. And for the first time I thought, maybe all of this was not only a danger for me but for her too. A few days later Mom suggested we go to the park together. She said she had long wanted to spend time as a family. I agreed, though inside everything tightened. I felt that Andre's presence beside me would feel even sharper with Mom around. We walked, the three of us, along the alley. Mom talked about work, about plans, and I barely heard her words. I felt how Andre walked next to me, how his steps matched mine, and it made me uneasy. At one point Mom stopped at a kiosk for coffee, leaving us alone. I felt my chest tighten. Andre looked at me as if he wanted to say something, but stayed silent. His gaze was too direct, and I quickly turned away, pretending to look at the trees. When Mom returned, she smiled at both of us and said, "You two are so quiet, like you're sharing a secret." I tried to laugh, but the laughter came out strained. Since then it became even harder for me to be with both of them at once. I was afraid Mom would sense the invisible line that Andre and I had not crossed, but kept approaching day after day. Soon I noticed that Mom began looking at me more attentively. Before she was always in a hurry, busy with her work, but now her gaze lingered longer than usual. One evening we were having dinner, and she suddenly asked, "Lyra, is everything okay with you? You seem thoughtful lately." I was confused, didn't know what to answer. Andre calmly poured tea as if he hadn't heard, but I saw his shoulders tense. I said everything was fine, just a lot of studying, and Mom nodded, but I felt she didn't fully believe me. Later, when I was clearing the table, Mom quietly added, "You know, sometimes it seems to me you look at Andre in a special way." My breath caught. I froze with a plate in my hands, not knowing what to say. She quickly smiled, said, "Well, maybe it's just me," and went to her room. But it became clear to me. She had sensed something. From that moment I tried even harder to control myself, to hide my eyes, to speak shorter. But the more I tried, the more obvious it became to me. Hiding all of this was almost impossible. A few days later Mom said she had errands in the city and that Andre and I could have dinner together. She said it calmly, but in her voice I caught a strange note, as if she was watching my reaction. I felt everything inside me tense, but I nodded and agreed. That evening I set the table, trying to do everything slowly so as not to reveal my nervousness. Andre came into the kitchen, helped lay out the dishes, and we sat down across from each other. It felt like the silence was thicker than the air. He asked how my day had been, and I answered briefly, but his gaze lingered on me longer than usual. I lowered my eyes, feeling my cheeks flush. At that moment, I suddenly realized that Mom might have deliberately arranged for us to be alone. And that thought was even heavier than the situation itself. I kept listening, thinking maybe the door would open and she would return early. But she didn't come back. Inside me, fear fought with a strange desire to remain in that silence longer. Andre barely ate either, only looking off to the side, and it seemed to me that he was afraid to say what was on his lips. The next day, Mom called me into the living room, sat down next to me and said quietly, "Lyra, I see that there is something between you and Andre. I don't judge, I just want to understand." My heart started pounding and my chest felt heavy. I stayed silent, not knowing what to say. Andre was in the kitchen, overhearing the conversation, but he didn't intervene. Mom continued, "I don't want to interfere, but it's important to me that you are honest with yourself and with me." I realized I could hide nothing anymore. I told her how I felt. A strange mixture of respect, care, and something that couldn't be put into words. Mom listened calmly, then smiled and hugged me. "Lyra, I'm glad you are honest. But remember, I will always be here and support you. You can trust me." I felt relief and a strange warmth inside. Later, when Andre returned, Mom left the room and left us alone, but now without tension or fear. We sat at the table drinking tea, and it felt as if the world had become a little lighter. The tension was gone, replaced by respect and quiet trust. We realized that our relationship could be complicated, but the most important thing was honesty and openness with ourselves and with those we care about. From that day, the house became safe and calm again, and my interactions with Andre no longer caused fear. We learned to understand each other, and gradually trust grew between us, replacing the previous tension. I realized that love is not just feelings, but responsibility, understanding, and the ability to maintain boundaries. And now I could live peacefully, knowing that our relationship had become stronger through honesty and respect for each other.